Okay, basic multimeter familiarization. Right off the flip, you can tell there are some commonalities between the two. We've got digital, we've got analog. The commonality is basically, as you can see, it's the groupings. So we've got DC voltage on both, AC voltage on both, and DC amperage on both. Resistance on both. The analog has a battery meter. We'll get to that in a moment. The digital also has functions for farad and transistors. Farad being used to read capacitors. Now, among the groupings, you can see on both of them different settings. All that is just how sensitive the measurement you're taking is. Up to 200 millivolts. Then we get into the singles, doubles, triples, all the way up to 4-digit volts. Diode function, which also generates tone for the resistance, 200 ohms from your single digits all the way up to your triples, 4, 5, and on. Your amperages you measure from 200 microfarads, that's what that little mu symbol is for micro, all the way up to single digits. That's both DC and AC. Voltage for AC, much like DC, goes 200 millivolts all the way up to 700. The analog has slightly lower ranges, and that's okay. You can see on the amperage for DC, the analog only goes up to 250 millivolts. This is all fine. It just, whatever your multimeter is built to, whatever the manufacturer decided, this is what we're going to build this multimeter model for. The analog is your basic $25 Walmart multimeter. You can do a lot with it, but for most professionals in our industry, I'm an A&P mechanic, you're going to want something a little bit like this one on the digital side. So, also on the digital, because it's more utilitarian, I guess, it can do more. Your black goes to the common, right? That's the ground. These other ones you have settings for. Voltage and resistance, and you can see there it's fused to 700 volts AC max, 1000 volts DC max. These two on the side are where you take your amperage readings, which means if I want to read voltage and ohms, I'm going to set my positive lead here. So you'll notice the digital also has a power button. That's to save the battery. Multimeters typically have a AA battery or a battery of some kind in them to provide a known amount of voltage for reading resistance. The way it works, you set your multimeter to read resistance. You plug the leads in to whatever it is you're trying to read resistance on. And it sends that known voltage downrange. Now, I'm measuring the resistance of myself between my forefinger and my thumb, and the negative means I have the lead swapped, so whatever. Now, DC voltage, we can check in parallel. Since I'm working with one hand, you kind of have to forgive me. It's a little bit awkward. The black goes to downstream or the ground, and the red one goes to your upstream or the power source, or where you expect power to be. You can see off that AA we're reading about a volt and a half, which is average. That's what AA's, AAA's, D cell, C cell, and most watch and hearing aid batteries put out. On the analog multimeter, we're going to do the same function test, and you will see the needle deflection. See? Now, we've got a battery tester down here for 1.5 and 9 volts, which we could have used. All this does is the same thing as DC voltage. This just has slightly lower circuit resistance, so you get a better swing. So down here you can see if the battery's good or not. I'll demonstrate it, but for our purposes, using DC voltage accomplishes the same thing if you know you're only looking for a low amount of voltage. See? Now, on the analog multimeter with resistance, I checked resistance on myself on the digital. I'll do it again here on the analog. The needle deflection isn't much, and that's fine. So you'll notice on the analog you have different scales. Most of your scales are going to be low number on the left, high number on the right, except resistance. On these analog multimeters, and this is where a lot of people get thrown, on the analog multimeters, if the needle deflects full right and you're set up for reading resistance, the lower resistance values are on the right. So if you have an analog multimeter like one of these, or a Simpson if you're a rich son of a bitch, and you are set up to read resistance, you go to take your ohm reading, say on a light bulb, and that needle swings full right, no resistance, it's a good circuit. So, notes about using multimeters. Voltage and resistance you can read in either parallel or series configuration, meaning I have the ground and I have my appliance. This is in parallel. In series, I have my appliance, and I'm going to the ground from the appliance. Or I'm going from power wire to the appliance, right? That would be wiring in series. Why do we only read amperage in series? Well, if we need to know how many amps we're putting through an appliance, say a flap motor, a radio, what have you, if you read in parallel, the amperage is going to divide itself. Remember, Basics Ohm's law says in series, amperage is constant. That, and it's a voltage safety issue, right? If I have this set to read amperage, and I read the amperage in parallel, and I've got a 3000 volt circuit, this multimeter is only rated to 1000 volts. So if I read parallel amperage on a 1,000-volt circuit. I just blew up my multimeter, and now I'm pissed because I got to go buy another one. Multimeters are not really difficult. They look difficult, they look intimidating because there's all these options and settings and labels. Most people don't know enough about electricity. So that's my video on basic multimeter functionality. I understand it's intimidating for most people, even if they do have basic electricity training. It's just a matter of knowing your instrument, knowing how to use it. You're going to make mistakes early on, and that's fine. And I've damaged mine. I've blown up multimeters. And the nice thing about most good multimeters, and even these basic cheap Walmart ones, is there's usually a fuse, right? So even on this cheap-ass Walmart multimeter, if I read it wrong, if I try to measure amperage while I'm set up for voltage, it's going to pop the fuse before it actually blows up the multimeter itself. In which case, you just open the back, find the fuse, replace it. But I understand, given all the groupings and settings and readings, how multimeter use can be. And I'm not trying to come off as condescending or patronizing. This is literally, I was once fresh on a multimeter and didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I was an electrician's mate in the U.S. Navy, and I've had a bunch of different electronics and electrical focused jobs in my life, so, you know, working those jobs since I was 16 years old, and I'm now 39, 23 years of experience, you kind of get comfortable with a multimeter. But there are people, and I'm not being condescending or patronizing, or at least I'm not trying to. I understand how it can intimidate people who have never used one before. You just needs to be shown how. That's all.